So I'm going to whip through this. I know you've already read it, but maybe you could make some notations on it, or on a yellow pad or something like that. And I'll try to steer you into what I think is critical or really important.
Okay.
So we've got this instant offer system, and these 5 steps are really important. You know, you got to connect with that seller and just take 5 to 10 minutes to no more than that. And I usually do that by walking around the property and trying to connect with them at the same time.
Okay.
So I can only tell you what I do. You don't have to do exactly this, but you could mirror this. You know, if you had an appointment after you pre-qualified them over the phone, you just want to basically, you know, you meet them at the door and you try to say, look, if this is okay, I'd like to walk around the outside of the property, and if you could tell me if there's anything I should know, like where the hot water heater is or the gas meter, anything like that. And then after we do that, if we could walk through the house, and then perhaps we can sit down and talk about some numbers. Would that make some sense to you? So what you've done is you've set the stage as far as what you want to see happen on an ideal basis. Now, not every time they agree to that, but most of the time, if somebody's coming over their house, they tend to be very agreeable in the very beginning anyway, because they don't want you to go away.
Right.
They want you to stay and make a good effort. So, you know, that first thing, connecting with that seller, you know, says, look, it's a great house. I spent a few minutes in the neighborhood. It looks like a great neighborhood. And you try to find as many good things about it as possible on the outside. And then when you walk through, try to start at the top and work down the bottom and go to the kitchen from there. Or reverse, you know, go to the bottom and work up to the top and then end at the kitchen. Okay. And then once you walk through the house, he says, you know, what I'd like to do is sit down at the kitchen table now with you, and I'd like to basically have this upfront agreement with you. And all that means is if after we talk about what I can do, and if you like that, we can basically say, you know, I'm 100% happy with that. Let's get going. Or, no, that's not going to be a fit for me. I don't think it'll work. Now, they go into detail about that step 2, that upfront agreement. They go in a little bit more detail with it. But that's a very, very important thing. And what are you trying to do, Robbie, when you say that? When you try to get that, you know, if you're 100% happy, let's get the pen to paper and get it done. You want to try to avoid what? What are you trying to avoid?
For them to have you come back, and I would think you would want to, or for them to, want to take more time to see if they want to do it, and give them more time to think about other options or.
Sure. Well, the nail in the coffin is let me think it over. You know, that's just one nail in the coffin that you want to avoid. Let me think it over. Okay? And we got to be able to prevent that. And that's what the upfront agreement does. You know, we're basically we'll go through that in a second. Step 3 is building that motivation of the seller. They have to really be motivated to think outside the box. And we negative phrase a lot of that stuff. You know, it says, you know, you might hate this idea, but. You might hate this idea, but. You know, that's called negative phrasing. I don't know if you'd be interested in this, and I don't even know if I can get my partner to agree to it, but if we could do this, you know, it's really phrasing it in such a way where you can't lose. You know, you can't lose, but you got to build out the motivation step before you do step 4. If you do the reverse, if you do the money step, well, how much are you going to give me for the house? You know, if you get that seller pushing you, I said, I don't know yet. I don't know yet. I need to understand the situation, and if you can't tell me what your situation is, I can't work with you.
Right, it seems by doing that too, it kind of puts you more in the eager chair instead of the reluctant. And they in here it seems to say that if you're more reluctant, it'll work out a lot better for you.
Mm-hmm. And the deals will stick. Sometimes people will say yes today and then give you a phone call in the morning and say, I thought it over. I really don't like it. They'll change their mind and after the fact. And you really got to get them to, and you'll see as you go into this thing what I mean by that. And that what if step, my partner might hate it. That is a very, very important step. And always have what's called appeal to a higher authority, which means you says, you just basically tell him, it says, I'm not the only one in this decision. My partner's got to agree to this, and that way they have to kind of help them sell it. So I'm going to kind of go over step one, connecting with the seller, building rapport. That's it's very simple to do. Like, are these your kids? How old are they now? That's easy to do, right? It's not a big deal.
Right.
There's questions to ask when you build rapport, when you don't know what to say. Like, where'd you grow up? And you have any kids? How old are they? What is it that you do for a living? How'd you get started in that career? What do you do for fun? These are just basic, big questions. Now, these two mistakes that's in here, spending too little time on rapport, number one, and thinking that step one is done just once, you check it off and it's gone. You do a little bit of rapport building all the way through all the way through the presentation, and like I just tell stories, Robbie. Stories build commonality, Oh, my brother, lived out in eastern Cleveland or whatever, and let me, whatever. It's stories help build rapport. So getting up to the second, can you read my screen right here? I don't know if you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Setting up the upfront agreement, it's time, right? Most precious thing you got is time. But most people,
right.
They will waste their time and waste their time and waste their time. An upfront agreement is simply a commitment that you and the seller make to each other to tell each other yes or no at the end of the conversation. And there's an example of how it should go.
Mm-hmm.
If this obviously isn't a fit, you're going to tell me that, aren't you? I appreciate that. Because I'm going to let you know that you're not going to hurt my feelings. Now, on the other hand, if what we talk through is a fit, and I like the terminology or the word patterns. Mr. Seller, if you're 100% happy with what we have, I can only presume that you would say yes today. We'll get something on paper today. And if you're even 1% unhappy about it, like 99% happy, but that tiny little thing is niggling at you, we won't do it. Because I just don't do business that way. You got to be 100% happy with what we're doing. Okay? Because you got to say today, and yes tomorrow, and yes next year about this. It's not something that you change your mind about. And I appreciate that. I'm going to let you know you're not going to hurt my feelings, But what's in bold here is really important on this page. If I can't see a way where I can meet your needs and make a profit for myself, that's a very important sentence, that first one. If I can't see a way where I can meet your needs and make a profit for myself, then I'm not going to want to buy your house. Are you okay if I have to tell you, no, I don't want to buy it? I mean, it wouldn't be anything personal to you. It's just meaning it's not a fit for me.
Right.
And then what's coming into the seller's head here? Oh, I understand that this has to work for both of us. It's got to be a win-win. It's got to be a good fit. Exactly. Now, if I feel it's a fit, I'm going to let you know that too. I'm going to say, Mr. Seller, this is a fit for me too. And what we're agreeing to do up front is to let each other know exactly where we stand when we're done. Either no, it's a fit, or yes, it is a fit. Isn't that what we just agreed to? Now, that's reinforcing. what you just agreed to. So it sounds like you're beating a dead horse there, but you're not. You're kind of making damn sure that step's done correctly.
Right.
Now that will take some practice, and I've been doing this for years, but some of my students do it really quickly, and some of them don't. It takes a little bit longer, and my job as your coach is to practice with you, and so you got a safe place to practice, right?
Right.
Now we're getting into step 3 here, building the seller's motivation. Now at this point, you set the stage. This is where you begin the negotiation. You got to uncover what their real needs are. You got to cure what's called the ostrich syndrome, which is the ostrich with their head in the sand, and eliminate the seller's other options. Now, the nonverbal communication, this is hard to teach long distance without me being right in front of you. But you see these facial expressions, these big eyes, these big eyes. It's like, it's like you're really shocked a little bit, It's a bit of an acting job, I know. Scrunchy face, you know what that is? It's like you just, huh? It's like, excuse me?
Can't believe what's...
And body language, non-threatening, passive. Now you're a big, strong guy, so you got to kind of practice this a little bit, because you're going to be dealing with people that are probably 150, 160 pounds, and little women that are like 70 years old. And what I love about you is you got an honorable profession that people would trust you more. We all trust the police. For
the most part.
Well, for the most part, the bad guys don't trust you. Okay, the lawyers don't trust you, but and the average American trusts their policemen. They just do.
Right.
Okay, maybe not in bad areas, but Okay, so all this body language is just non-threatening. It's the biggest thing. Now, so you uncover the real needs with this dialogue, and this is going to sound like a real stupid question, but it just gets things started. And he says, "Now, so what were you hoping I could do for you here today?" Now, it sounds like a dumb question, right? But what you want them to do is you want them to try to help you buy the house, is what you're trying to do.
Right.
And you want them to work at it. It's 85, 90% they're going to say, I want you to buy my friggin' house, right? Okay. Oh, and now see how you react to that? Oh, okay. So what else have you tried to sell your house in the past? You got to listen really careful about this. And draw out his motivation for selling. You got to use this negative phrasing to get the seller to admit and become emotional about his problems with the property. Okay? You got to ask dumb questions to turn the seller's concerns into positive things. The seller's going to really strongly correct you. And he's going to tell you how big of a problem it really is for him. Hint, use your big eyes, like, oh, really? Here's an example. So, what have you tried in the past? I've listed it with an agent. Big eyes. Oh, well, great. And that worked really well for you? Now, you know damn well it didn't work out well for him. Right?
Right.
You see how this is a little bit of an acting job? A little bit?
Right.
But what you're trying to do is basically say, I can't stand any of these agents, Now so once you got to that point, listed with an agent, and then you flush out the seller's real timeline to sell. Now during this step, we never call it a deadline. It's like playing poker and you ask the other person to show his cards, right? He's not going to do that unless he's never played before. Most likely your seller's going to be real cagey about this information. Here's how it might go. Here's you, the investor, says, I never asked you, but when did you want this property handled? I mean, do you want it handled in 6 months or 12 months? I mean, ideally, When did you want to have it handled? Now, if he's under the gun, he's going to tell you the truth, right? If he's got a new job to go to, or he's fed up with screwing around with a 90-day or 180-day listing that's expired, he's going to say the following. He's going to say, as soon as possible, I want to handle. Oh, okay.
No, why?
Go ahead.
Why do they, or why would they be hesitant in telling you? I mean, is that just they don't look too anxious to want to get, or too needy to get rid of it? Or, I mean, why would they be so reluctant as to tell you why or how long they want to do a deal?
Well, some people, not all people, but some people, they don't like to tell you the truth. They try to guard the facts. They try to keep their cards close to the vest, Robbie. And not all the people are like that, but a lot of people are, And so what you want to do is draw this information out, and you say, okay, and the reason for that again? I mean, you might have actually told me this, but I may have missed it. I'm going to say one thing, if you remember one thing about drawing information out, is this: tell doesn't sell. Right? If you gave them 10 reasons to do business with you today, they might say yes today and then have buyer's remorse and call you the next day and say, I really don't want to do it. Do you know what I mean by that?
Okay.
So you need them to say it. You need them to say it and draw it out of them.
I see.
That's a big thing. So tell doesn't sell. If they say it, they mean it. Okay? So we need to get them to say it. So it's almost like two detectives in the interview room trying to get them to confess. It's just trying to get them to talk about what's important to them. So the reason for that, again, you might have told me this, but I may have missed it. Well, we want to get on with our lives and move. That's our goal. Get rid of this house so we don't have to worry about it. Okay, so sell the house somewhere in the next 3 to 6 months. Am I hearing you right? Well, we're thinking the next, week even. We want to do it as soon as possible. We don't want to wait. Oh, so you're open to doing it quickly. You see how he's phrased that? You're open to doing it quickly? Oh, definitely. Oh, good. I'm glad. For some reason, I thought you wanted to wait longer. No.
Okay.
What are you, Forrest Gump? Jesus, no. I want to get moving. Okay, well, good. So you see how you basically got them to tell you they need to sell fast, right?
Right.
So now what we're doing is we're eliminating the seller's other options. Now your goal here is to get the seller to tell you that you are his best option. How do you do that? By eliminating all his other alternatives, all of them. Here's number 1, listing the property with an agent. He's already done that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now the investor says, well, if you can't sell it yourself, the good thing is you can always list it with the property with another real estate agent and have them sell it for you. I mean, at least you know that they're going to earn their 6% commission by selling the place for you, right? Now you slide it in that 6% commission, right? And he hates that. He hates paying that kind of money for it, right? Now we don't want to list it with an agent. That'll cost us friggin' $12,000 in commissions. Oh yeah, I can see how that's a lot of money to pay an agent out of your equity. You see how you're always agreeing with him, but you're reinforcing. Right. You're reinforcing by rephrasing what he just said. You're saying it a slightly different way. You're not saying it exactly word for word.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I see that.
It's a little subtle.
Redirecting them.
It's a little subtle. You see where it says that would cost us $12,000 in commissions, and you're saying, oh yeah, I can see how that's a lot of money to pay an agent out of your equity. They're both different things. They're basically the same thing, but you're just rephrasing it, and you're killing that option. You're just killing it by agreeing with them. You're not telling them they're telling you.
Right.
You see how you're not directing them at all? You're kind of asking a lot of questions.
Okay.
So here's the next one. It's probably not a problem if you don't sell right now. At least you can move into your next house, and if it takes you 6 to 12 months to sell this place, at least it won't be a problem to cover both payments, right? Now, and I know that that's just dumb to pay 2 payments. Okay? It's stupid. And people would hate that. But if you phrase it in such a way, you want to get them to say, hey, excuse me, no, I don't want to make 2 payments. No, we don't want to have to do that. That would be a real financial strain for us to make both payments. Big eyes, right? Oh, that would be a financial strain for you. I can understand that. The next one, renting the place out for themselves. The good thing is if you rent the place out, at least you can enjoy working with your tenants and collecting rents and all of that, right? Now, of course, you want them to hate landlording and not even care about being a landlord, right? You want them to hate it. But you want to hear them hate it, right? You want to draw it out of them.
Right.
You see how that's so much of a stronger way to do it? It says, well, you wouldn't want to, how do you feel about renting? You see, that's not strong enough. This is much stronger than how do you feel about renting.
Right.
You see, it's like, Robbie, I don't know if you're married or you're dating a girl, whatever, but it says, I got a girl for you. You probably really like this girl. She's 6 feet, about 190 pounds, and she looks like a big, strong girl from Nebraska that could bale some hay. You'd probably love that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
So
it's kind of like that. It says, excuse me, no, well, fuck no. I want her, 5'8", 120 pounds, and, size 4, whatever. But, that makes sense, right? It's getting them emotionally involved in the conversation. They're letting you know their cards by doing it this way. I hate dealing with renters. It's a big hassle. Number 4. Now, renting the place out through property management company. It's a good thing that if you rent this place out through a management company, at least you'd have it out of your hair, right? And what do you want them to hear? What do you want them to say? You want them to say like this. No, last time I used a management company, they called me all the time, and I just want to be done with it. Oh, they called you a lot. Big eyes. Use whatever they got. Use whatever they got. Okay? Oh, I didn't realize that. Alternative number 5. Keeping the property empty. So, Robbie, the good thing, if you don't sell it right away and the property's empty, at least you wouldn't have to worry about people breaking in and stuff. I mean, it's a good neighborhood, right? Yeah, I guess. I mean, you never really know what could happen. I'd feel better if I didn't have to worry about that. Oh, yeah, I can understand how that would be stressful. He just rephrased that?
Right.
Okay, now, if they're in foreclosure, there's some laws that you've got to be aware of in foreclosures. And I don't want to go through all the laws right now about foreclosures, but if it's in pre-foreclosure, before the notice of sale, you can do certain things. But once there's a notice of sale, it's another set of rules, okay? And we want to get them before the notice of sale.
Okay.
All right? But the ideal...
So pre-foreclosure is what you're looking for.
Or no foreclosure. They're current on their payments, right, and they want to protect their credit, and they have no equity, but they're trying to sell, and they're being a good person by keeping their mortgage payments current. Okay?
Okay.
So I'm going to kind of go over the foreclosure stuff right now and get into the money step.
Okay.
Now you're ready to talk the numbers through with the seller. Notice that, you need to save this part of the negotiation for near the end. I want you to write this down. Biggest mistake is negotiate the numbers without building the seller's motivation first. I'm going to repeat that. Biggest mistake is to negotiate the numbers without building the seller's motivation first. So the money step, there's two parts to it. The first one, you get all the financial details of the seller situation out on the table. And I have a form that I use that just gives me the address and the existing financing, and it's just one piece of paper.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll when we get a lead, we'll use this piece of paper to be able to get everything out on the table. Basically, you're getting them to put all the details out there in such a way that it becomes a starting point for negotiations, and it's not the final price. I'm going to repeat that. You're getting them to put all the details out there in such a way that it becomes the starting point for the negotiations, but it's not the final price. You might be thinking you could never do both these things, but with a little coaching, anybody can be a great negotiator. You know, you weren't born on how to be most negotiators learn their trade. Just like a cop or a fireman, they learn their trade. Now, we're going to give you some word language patterns that are slam dunk when negotiating with sellers. It's still up to you and only you to put them to work. Now, you were saying these 3 R's like you were before, right? The range technique,
right.
The realistic technique, and the realtor technique. Okay, and the best way to negotiate money is to listen to an actual negotiation. Now, what I'll try to do is kind of whip through this. So what do you think the house is worth, Mr. Seller? Oh, about $350,000. Oh, it's worth $330,000 to $350,000. Oh, okay. Now that's a range technique. You just went $20,000 below.
Right.
Actually, I think it's worth $350,000. Oh, okay, $340,000 to $350,000. I guess it's around there. You know, sounds like such a game, doesn't it? But you know, that's negotiating. Your profit is in the purchase. Your profit is in the purchase. Okay. You don't profit when you sell. You profit when you buy. Yeah, I guess it's around there. Let me ask you, what did you realistically think you would get considering the house's situation? Now stop right there. That's a very important question. Let me ask you, what did you realistically think you'd get considering the house's situation? Okay. Oh, I thought I'd get at least $335,000 or more. Oh, $320,000 to $335,000. Okay. So you're using it again, right?
Right.
Oh, now a thought just occurred to me. If a real estate agent came to you and said that he could get the house sold in the next 30 days, and you were convinced he could get it sold for you in the next 30 days for, let's say, the full $320,000, you know what you just did right there? He wants $350,000, and you're using the low end of your range here.
Right.
Can you see that on my screen?
Yeah, the 320.
Yep. And you went to this range here. He said, well, I thought I'd get at least $335,000 or more. Oh, $320,000 to $335,000. Okay. So what you're doing is you're taking that low range and putting it here. So let's say we get that full $320,000 for you, or even maybe a little bit more. You'd probably turn that down, huh? Or would you? You tell me. So what you're doing is you're trying to get him to say absolutely no, I won't take the $320,000.
Right.
Oh, at this point, I'd probably just take it to be done with this mess, right? Oh, that makes sense. Well, let's see. The 6% of 320 is, you know, and I take a calculator and I hand it to him, right?
Okay.
So, you know, I like to do 1%, right? It's easier. 1% of 320,000 is $3,200, right? You move the decimal over 2 places and it's $3,200. $3,200 is 1%, so 6% is 3 times 6 is, that's about 18,000. Okay. So, you know, I'm getting the full commission is roughly $20,000. Is that what you're getting? Yeah, I'm getting about, so I'd get about $300,000 after it's all said and done. Now let's stop right there. Is he right?
Well, I mean, let's see, 320. No, because he's still, what he's got to factor in what he owes on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's say his gross is, after he subtracts the 6%, all right? Are those his only costs to sell?
No, he's got closing costs.
Yes. Do you know what seller's concessions is?
And then, is that where they'll pick up like some of the closing costs for the buyer, or if something's broken, instead of fixing it, they'll just mark it off the price?
Yeah, it's a way to help the buyer get the mortgage. Okay. So let's say FHA has very strict appraisals, and if there's something wrong with the appraisal, it has to be fixed before it can be sold. So seller's concessions can be used to fix that, and it generally comes out of the equity of the seller. So a lot of sellers are very, very ignorant as far as what the real costs to sell are. And I teach you how to show the seller exactly what the costs to sell are. Okay? But we don't do that at this stage in the negotiation. I just wanted to ask you if you knew what the sale, the cost to sell. If you list with an agent, it's generally vacant from the time of the listing, most of the time, to the point that it actually closes escrow, and it's usually at least 90 to 180 days. So he usually has to pay PITI during that period. So he might have to pay for a vacant house for a while. And that's expensive. That could be, anywhere from, $1,500 to $2,000 a month times 3 to 6 months. So that's a good amount of money, right?
Right.
Okay, so to continue on the negotiation, the seller in his brain is saying, yeah, I'd get about $300,000 after it's all said and done. Well, I think you're right. You'd walk away with $300,000 less your share of the closing costs. Now, you just slip that one into the conversation, right? What do you think the closing costs would be, Mr. Seller? I had a real estate agent friend who told me it usually is about 1%, your share of it. So in this case, 1% is $3,000 or so. Does that sound about what do you think it'd be? Hey, I never really thought they'd add that in, but I guess you're right. Gosh, I really don't seem like I'm going to get much of anything. Now, you haven't written any number down yet, right, until you get to this bottom number of 297. Now, you label, this is important, you label that number full price amount to seller, okay? That's a label you're putting on this number. And I just use a yellow pad. I put a 297, I circle it, and I label it full price amount to seller. Okay? Now, whoever labels different pieces of information has a tremendous advantage in that negotiation. So labeling is a very important thing. Okay. So now tell me, what did you owe? What's your payoff on your mortgage against the property? What do you owe against the property? Oh, $280. Now, is that just one first mortgage, or is it spread out one or two or more loans? Oh, that's just one first mortgage. Okay. And what's that payment every month? Oh, it's $2,350, and that includes taxes and insurance. And how many months is the house behind right now? You notice you said house and not the seller?
Yeah.
So how many months is the house behind right now? Four payments behind, going on 5 in 2 more weeks when the next payment's due. Oh, so you're about $10,000 behind as far as the next payment plus late fees and any other fees that your lender tax on. So now you got another $10,000. Do you see in this example, right? He's got $2,350 and he's got 5 months. Okay, so that's more than $10,000. And then he's got, $280 against it. So that's like 290, right?
50.
Do you see what I'm doing?
Yeah, that's like 11,000 for the payments. Yeah.
So if it's 11 grand plus the 280, so that's 291, and his bottom line number is 297. He really only has, if he's lucky, like 6-7 grand left.
Right.
Okay.
And
all right.
Now, as far as saying the house, is that just so you don't kind of make them feel bad about themselves that they're behind? And,
yeah. Okay. You don't insult them.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad that license is being lost because well, not that you're losing the license, but the license is being lost. I don't know. I'm trying to use examples that you get in your head.
I get it.
Yeah. Okay. So step 5, this is the what if step. It's a very powerful two-way phrase. What if? We're not saying it's possible by what if it were possible that these two words would mean that a seller would never reject any formal offer you made. If you could have these two words, what would it mean to you? How valuable would these words be to you in your investing? Would you be willing to donate $1,000 to your favorite charity just to get an email from us telling you what these two words were and exactly how to use them? You would? Okay. Well, actually, we're a little confused here. Why would these two words be so important to you? Now, that's a negotiation right there. All kidding aside, you probably just noticed the language pattern of the preceding 2 paragraphs because they parallel exactly the tactic you will take with the seller in this, the final step of the offer system. These 2 words will guarantee you never have a seller reject any formal offer you make. What I tried to do is really bold stuff that I thought was really, really important.
Okay.
So, anything that's bolded, I just put a yellow highlighter on just the bolded stuff. And just so your eyes have to go to it. So this first one I'm bringing up is, if I can't see a way where I can meet your needs, and I'd pause there just a little bit, and make a profit for myself, then I'm not going to want to buy your house. Are you okay if I have to tell you, no, I don't want to buy it? I mean, it wouldn't mean anything personal about you. It would just be me saying it's not a fit. And then what you want to elicit is that response here. I understand this has to work for both of us. Now that's a reasonable person, isn't it? That's what you want. You want a reasonable person. Now there are some very unreasonable sellers out there, and that's what we're trying to do, is to get somebody reasonable.
Okay.
Now let's see if we can't, these 3 things here, these 3 goals, uncover what the seller's real needs are, stop this head in the sand, especially if it's in the foreclosure category, and eliminate all the other options that they can think about. Now, I don't think we went over this building motivation with sellers that are in foreclosure, and these are the ostrich people, okay? Now, you really do need people that are behind on their bills. I don't like dealing with them. I just don't. I would rather go find somebody that cares about their credit and their current. That's my particular thing. Now, if there's a huge amount of equity, I'll go try to get some private money for it. Don't even bother with a bank. I'll call one of my private lenders. I say, I need 20 grand for 6 months. I'll give you 6% annual interest, which is 12% a year, for that 6 months use of the money. And then I'll use that money to cure the note and buy it on subject to. Cure the note means make all the back payments and buy it on subject to. Does that make sense?
Cure the note. Okay, so just bringing it up to date.
Yes, that's what cure the note means. So when you're trying to build motivation with sellers that are in foreclosure, remember the sellers who are in foreclosure, they're what? They're embarrassed, right? They're ostrich. that's where the ostrich comes in. You know, I mean, I'm trying to use an analogy in your work. You know, if you got a domestic disturbance and a woman was hurt, you know, some guy, you know, hit her or whatever, you know, a lot of those guys are very nice guys, you know, and they're really embarrassed for what they did, and they were drunk and they didn't know what they were doing, and they really care about that person. And it's similar to that. There's some shame involved with foreclosure, as you can imagine, especially if your mom and dad raised you to be honorable, right?
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to get at as far as this embarrassment, even to themselves, what their real situation is. So what do? They live in denial. You know?
That makes sense, yeah.
It's very logical. So it's so important to spend the time to build their motivation with these foreclosure people. Now, as we mentioned in this first step of connecting with the seller, the rapport is 5 to 10 minutes. Step 3 in this building motivation, it might take you 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay.
Why? Because they've been ostriches for months. And how are you going to do that fast? How are you going to shake them fast out of the ostrich syndrome? So here's a...
Right, probably too,
Go ahead.
Oh,
sorry.
I was just saying, probably too, if you try moving with some of these people too quick, that might be I'm guessing that could be a turnoff too, is like,
sure.
You know, you're just trying to rush them to make a decision, and
I don't know. You got to do the reverse. You got to take more time than you think you need.
Right, okay.
So if you're very effectively oriented, you make your money here in the negotiation, and you should take your sweet time doing it. When I see somebody beat up, you know, they've been like in denial. They got this stack of mail that they haven't even looked at. You know, they're not proactive at all. They're reactive, and they're trying to hide. They're hiding.
I see.
I'll spend a couple of hours with that person.
Okay.
Because what they're looking for is somebody to rescue them. They are looking for a white knight, and it takes a long time for them. And, you know, if somebody's willing to take a subject to and will cure the note, and for 10 grand pick up 50 grand equity, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
You know, and if it takes me 2 or 3 hours to get to that point where they're willing to do that, and maybe a couple of grand for moving money or whatever, you know, I'll seriously, you know, we're looking at serious money. We're looking at, you know, throwing maybe, I don't know, $1,200, $1,500 to clean it up with new carpet and put it on the market with an agent, and pay the agent, you know, 8-9 grand to sell it, and we're still walking with 20-30 grand. Now,
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's great. Okay. So let's go through this foreclosure negotiation. Now, the investor is saying, now, Samantha, you're telling me on the phone a few days ago that you just received a letter from your lender saying that they were about to start the official foreclosure. And a lot of people would be scared by that kind of letter. You notice I emphasize scared, right?
Right.
But you probably just took that in stride, right? Now, you know she's scared, right? And that takes some practice to say that. Who wouldn't be scared, right? But if you state it like this, what's going to happen? They're going to tell you the truth. They're going to pull their head out of the sand a little bit. They're going to say, no, really, not really. It freaked me out, you know. I mean, I was really it was really scary to get that letter. Oh, really? Tell me more about what you felt when you got that letter. And you're drawing them out. Well, I remember thinking to myself, what am I going to tell my family about this if I lose the house? So what's that? They're embarrassed?
Right.
You know, I can imagine that it must be really hard for you to think about. I mean, I know a lot of people just run away and hide from the truth. Heck, you probably were tempted just to run away from what that letter meant. No, I knew I couldn't run away. I mean,
Sure, I thought about it for a moment. I still do at times, but I know it's not going to help me any. Well, if worst came to worst and you lost the house to the bank, I'm sure your family would be supportive and wouldn't judge you in any way. And that's not true, right, Robbie? This woman cares a lot about her self-respect and her approval from her family, which is some of the most powerful motivation you can get. They'd be there for me, but they sure would let me know how I'd messed up. What do you mean? They'd make comments and whatnot, It wouldn't be too obvious, but they take these little shots and stuff like that. I don't want to have to deal with that when I'm back visiting them 10 or 20 years from now. And the conversation would continue along those lines. Go back and read through that sample script one more time. This time look for one other technique we used in negotiation to help the seller emotionally associate her situation instead of just holding it off at a distance. So what you're doing, that's really well said right there. You're bringing it closer to them.
Okay.
And the hint was, we asked questions like, tell me a little bit about what you felt when you got that letter, and how do you mean? You're bringing it closer. These are prompts that you give the seller so he or she goes into more detail about how they felt. And this scares a lot of investors to even think about doing this. They say, I want to buy foreclosures because I like houses or because I like running the numbers. And this is another thing in bold here. The real truth is that houses and numbers are not the business that you're in. Connecting emotionally with sellers who need your help is your core business, and never forget this.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was reading through it the first time, and that part really stuck out, was that, if you're going to be able to help them out, you're going to be able to, and help yourself too, but you'll be able to do more deals that way.
Sure. And you'll get more profitable deals that way. When you connect with people, they're willing to give up some equity. They're willing to do something creative, like a lease option or a subject to or a contract for deed or land contract. So we went through step 4, the money step, and those 2 goals, and the 3 R's.
Right.
And the what if step. And we finished that what if step. And the 5 keys to closing the deal. Did we I think we left there. Did we stop there?
Yeah, that's where we stopped at.
All right. So let's just go through these 5 keys in this recording. All right. And this is something that you can keep on your iPhone and listen to over and over and over again, which will really be one of the critical things for you to make the most amount of money per deal. So getting motivation before money. If you don't do this, it's probably the biggest mistake you can make. Single most important key to closing the deal is to remember not to share any numbers or specifics of price and terms before you spend time talking through the seller's motivation of the property. In order for you to get a great deal on a property, you need the seller to feel motivated. Now, we use the word feel intentionally. It's one thing if the seller intellectually knows he's motivated. It's another thing for him to feel it in his stomach, in his gut. One is an intellectual response, the other is an emotional response. When you can help the seller cut through the layers of denial, that's really strong right there. The layers of denial and get to the emotional core of why this property you're talking about buying is such a burden to him, then you're going to get a great buy. If you don't do this, you're not going to get a great buy, or you might not get anything at all. So to draw out the seller's motivation is something we call building the seller's motivation, and the process by which you help the seller's thoughts to the emotional core of why he is selling and why it has grown to be such a negative thing that he hasn't sold the property yet. You accomplish this primarily through the use of questions, many of which will be negatively phrased questions you learned earlier. Here's a list of great questions to use, and you notice this is bolded, right?
Right.
So what you can do is take all this bolded stuff and actually just, if you want, you can write them out, or you can print them out, or you can, and just stick them to the wall, so that you're getting this very important stuff in your head. So going over the stuff that's highlighted here, here's a list of great questions to use when you're building the seller's motivation in your next negotiation. What were you really hoping I could do for you here today? And shut up. It's a very strong question. And it's not yes or no. It's very open-ended, isn't it? And what else have you tried in the past to sell the house? And that worked really well? You know? And why do you think it didn't work out as well as you planned? Well, at least it's not a problem for you that, insert the problem, right? Now, Susie, what happens if you can't sell? What are you going to do then? And when did you want the property handled? Was it 6 months or 12 months? I mean, ideally, when you would have had the property handled. And what's the single most important thing you want to get out of this deal? So those are like critical questions you should be asking every single person that when you have a sit-down interview with the seller.
Okay.
All right. Now, if you're an analytical person, if you're a lawyer type or a procedure type person, this is going to be hard, talking in descriptive language versus technical language, and it takes practice to be good at it. Now, if you're going to say the following, Mr. Seller, what if we were to lease option your house with an option price of $150,000? We would give you $1 as option consideration in addition to our commitment to the lease, which will be an additional option consideration. The term of the lease will be 1 year with 5 additional 1-year renewals to come up on a rolling basis every 12 months. Well, I'm sorry, that's not going to work.
Right.
That is not going to work. Right? Now, do you use...
kind of know what
It's confusing.
Yeah.
It's confusing, what I just said. So have your eyes glazed over? Are you a little intimidated by this legal contract language? If you feel that way, imagine how the sellers feel. You're in the business. They're going to think scared and confused. And when you have a scared seller or a confused seller, they're going to say no and get you out of their house.
Yeah.
So you failed it by talking in technical language. So they're not going to ask you questions to clarify his understanding or to settle his anxiety, his fear. He's going to tell you one word, no thanks, or no. So instead, you want to do this. And this should be bolded, but it's not. Mr. Seller, what if we were to make you a guaranteed monthly payment, and then at some point down the road, we were to cash you out of your property at your full $150,000 price we talked about a little moment ago? Is that something we could talk about, or probably not? Now, that is the way to talk to sellers right there. So if I had a one test question on this 45-page training material, that would be, what would you say, what if statement to the seller? That is your close. If they say, yes, I want this, or no, I don't, you know where you're going. The funny thing is, what you said in the second example describes the functional terms, what you said in technical jargon in the first example. Remember, sellers want to feel comfortable with whatever you offer them. You have to explain things to them in language that's simple, and it tells them exactly what do they get. Never use jargon or fancy language to cloud up the discussion. It usually serves only to bolster some investor's fragile ego at the expense of his bank account. It's like, I know my shit. Let me show you how much I know my shit. You know, it's an ego thing.
Right.
It takes talent to say it that way. It takes real, incredibly creative talent to study what's the best way to talk to these people. And that's why this training is so valuable to new people. You get to know the word patterns of what works the best.
Right.
So when given the choice to be a professional or an ordinary person, you know, be an ordinary person. Okay?
Yeah.
Don't try to be real sophisticated and show off everything you want to do. And people don't want to sell their house to a professional. Not only are they afraid that the professional might be so sharp as to take advantage of them, but also it's difficult to have an emotional connection with the professional. You know, you don't get a warm and fuzzy with your CPA, you know. It just doesn't happen. So instead, be a person or an individual. Most beginning investors fall into this trap of putting on their professional persona almost like a suit of armor. They feel that this armor will protect them from the discomfort of a seller saying no to them and from the anxiety of looking like they don't know what they're doing. And when you're in the beginning, just remember, try to be a nice, friendly person that has these tools in your toolbox. Little do they know that this armor protects them, also keeps the sellers at arm's length. It's almost impossible to have an emotional connection with the seller if you hold them at arm's length by being too professional. Now, as you already know, the single most important key of being an effective negotiator on a property is to build an emotional connection with the seller. So here's how we handle this issue when it comes up with the seller. Oh, you know, what company are you with? Company? I'm not with some big national company. My company is small, just me. Did you want to sell to a huge corporation? Because if that's the case, I want to be respectful of your time and my time. And you're basically saying, I'm going to take a hike if you need a big company, because that's not me.
Right.
Oh, no. I just wanted to know if you were a company or by yourself. Actually, I'm glad you're not a huge company. I find them a bit intimidating. They may not disclose that, but that's how they're feeling. Can you tell me what your program is? Program? You know, I don't really have a program. I mean, I meet with property owners and I talk with them. If I can buy their house in a way that's a fit for them and I can conservatively make a profit, then I buy the property. If not, then I don't. Do I need a program to talk with you about buying your house? That's a really good rebuttal about, tell me about your program.
Yeah, I like that one. That was probably one of the best ones I've seen in there. Is, you know, this whole one that we're going through is one I like the most. You know, it really brought it down.
Exactly. But you're almost slapping them a little bit. Excuse me, I don't have a program. I'm sorry.
Right.
Oh, no. Just, it was this last investor I talked with had this canned program he was trying to push on me. Now, where do we go from here? Well, I don't know yet. I don't know. Can I ask you a few questions to see if this property that I would even want to buy? You see, don't be an eager buyer there, Robbie.
Okay.
Even if they're offering you to, you know, they're opening the door open, you're still trying to set the stage or the tone about what you need to do in order to be successful with the house. Now, people mistakenly believe that being professional gives them credibility in the eyes of the seller. Credibility doesn't come from being the expert. Credibility is a state of mind, and when you feel it and believe it in yourself, the seller will too. Now, I'm going to try to ask you a question about that, credibility. You know, when remember your rookie year, you had to kind of pump yourself up and believe in yourself, right? Because you weren't sure of everything.
Sure.
And you were always worried about looking foolish, right? In front of your senior trainer, whatever. And you wanted him to feel at the end of every shift that you're on the ball. You know?
Right.
I don't have to worry about Robbie Prock. because he's on the ball, and he's careful, he's paying attention, he's not doing anything stupid. So anyway, putting on your professional armor and trying to fit a program on the seller is not the way to go. In order to be successful investing, you got to take a small risk of letting your real self come through with the seller. Now, while you do risk the seller saying no, we guarantee that you'll dramatically increase your yeses along the way if you don't try to be too professional. So getting the seller to say yes before you even make your offer. How do you do that? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to only make offers to sellers you know will say yes? Well, imagine you had a hidden device that would make a small beep if the seller was going to say yes, and beep twice if the seller was going to say no. I'll pay you $340,000 for the house. Beep, beep. I mean, $342,000. Beep. What would you say? Obviously, you'd have an extremely powerful advantage in any negotiation. Until Sony comes out with this device, you're going to have to make your own. And you're going to have to do it with the two most powerful words in any negotiation is, what if? What if is such a powerful phrase because it commits you to nothing and commits the other side to everything. So, for example, imagine you're negotiating a lease option on a nice 3-bedroom house. You've done most of your negotiating and you're in the final stages of closing the deal. Rather than make an offer like, Mr. Seller, I'll pay you $342,000 for your house, instead, ask a what-if question. I'm going to repeat that. That's really important, that paragraph. For example, imagine you're negotiating a lease option on a nice 3-bedroom house. You've done most of your negotiating and you're in the final stages of closing the deal. Rather than make an offer like, Mr. Seller, I'll pay you X dollars for your house, instead, you ask a what-if question. And here it is. Mr. Seller, I don't know if I could do this. That's a scrunchy face, right? I don't know if I could do this. But what if I were able to pay you $342,000 for your house? Is that something that would work for you, or probably not? You see the difference, Robbie, in those two?
Yeah.
This is a critical thing. It's a critical thing. So talk to me about
the one atop where it says, I'll pay you. You're kind of just telling them, and then right. Whereas the other one is you're kind of asking, is that all right, or probably not. And so you're as it says in here, you're leaving the decision up to them, which is what they want to feel in charge over.
Perfect. Now, they also feel that you're being fair by asking versus telling, right?
Yeah.
You can pick up women with this. I'm serious. Dude, let's just turn it around with a pickup line. Now, hey Susie, I'll pick you up at 8:00. We'll go to a nice restaurant, okay? Now you're telling her, right?
Right.
Now I know there's some women that like to be bossed around a little bit, but I think most women don't.
Yeah.
So you could say, Susie, I don't know if you'd be interested, but what if I were able to pick you up at 8:00, bring you down to the best restaurant in town, and get you home by midnight? Would that be something you could think about, or maybe not?
Right.
And they're going to go, oh, I'd think about that.
Right.
So it's just psychology, right? People rather be asked than be told.
Right.
So when you make a formal offer, you've given all the control over the deal to the other party, and when you had an offer, you get a yes or no. When you qualify your offer using what-if phrasing, you aren't really making a formal offer. Yet once the seller agrees to your what-if offer, the seller has committed by saying yes. And this is your way of never making an offer until the seller has agreed to accept it. And it's so strong, it's silly. So think of it this way. Imagine you, the investor, you're a baseball pitcher. As a pitcher, you're in total control up to the moment you throw the ball. When you release the ball, who's in control? The batter. Well, the seller is the batter. who's waiting for you to pitch the baseball, which is the offer. Once you, as a pitcher, have thrown the ball, meaning made your offer, you've given all the control over the next step of the batter, which is the seller. Now, the batter can either choose to swing or not. You can only have to wait and hope he'll swing. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to fake throw the pitch to see if the seller was going to swing even before you released your offer or the ball? But, it is allowed in negotiating. So that's exactly what this phrasing does for you. It commits the seller to swing at your offer before you even make it. Only when the seller says yes to your what-if offer do you actually make it. If the seller says no to your what-if offer, you simply move to another what-if offer and find one that they'll say yes to. Then see if you can put a deal together based on this acceptable what-if offer.
Makes sense.
It's very logical, and it's just being trained in the exact way to be able to get success. We've watched hundreds of investors negotiate deals and find that almost all of them, except the most successful ones, they chase the deal in the closing stages of the negotiation, meaning they give the final power to say yes or no to a deal over to the seller. That should be bolded right there. This is the vast majority of even experienced investors. They'll write up an offer and then they'll chase it. So these investors leave the negotiating table knowing that they've missed out on tens of thousands in profits, but not knowing that what they could have done differently. Put the power of these seemingly innocent words, what if, to work for you making money. So let's get into make it their idea. This is where ego gets in the way. A lot of people in the real estate investing, they have huge egos. They think that they're the smartest people in the world, and nobody can do it better than them. Have you ever heard the expression, the cook always loves his own cooking the best? Well, same thing is true in real estate. If you can give ownership of the offer to the seller will be much more committed to that specific offer. And this means you'll have a deal that will stay closed. I can't tell you how many students that don't try to be, well, this is a kind thing to do to give it to the seller for it's their idea. You're showing some kindness and some humility here that it's not your idea. You got to get them to think it's their idea. You can do this with kids too, right? I got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. I do this all the time. Oh, you're so clever. How did you come up with that idea? Right? Even though it's my idea, right?
Now I'm going to start negotiating with my kids here.
How old are your kids, Robbie?
I got a 13-year-old stepdaughter and a 5-year-old daughter.
Great. Well, good luck with girls because they're very irrational. Boys are a lot easier. I'm serious.
Yeah, I'm in a house full of them.
Oh, really? Maybe you should go down to the local high school and coach some football to get some testosterone in you. I'm serious. Go show up 1 or 2 days a week and teach them a few tricks that you learned when you were in your days of playing football. Okay, so make it their idea. Here's exactly how you do it. Investor, I didn't know we could do this, but what if we were able to pay you the $1,800 a month and at some point in the next 5 years completely cash out the property at the full $245 price we talked about earlier? Is that something that would work for you or probably not? Well, I think that would work for me. You think that would work for you, or you know it would work for you? Oh, I love that one right there.
Yeah.
You're putting the nails into the coffin there. Not that you're killing the seller. I'm just saying that you're actually closing that deal up so tight that they can't get out of it. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, I know it'll work for me.
Making them be definite about it, not have any room to waver.
Yeah, you're making them reinforce. It's a reinforcing statement where they have to pick, not kind of work for me, but really work for me. Oh, and then you're doing it one more time. Oh, okay, so if I'm hearing you right, you want me to make the monthly payments of $1,800 a month, and you want me to cash you out at some point within the next 5 years at the full $245,000 price. Did I get that right? Now, you know what Columbo is? Columbo was a show in the 70s about this detective, and he was always scratching his head, and he looked frumpled, and he always played a little dumb, you know?
Yeah.
That's a Columbo right there. Did I get that right? And do you see what this paragraph says? It says, so if I'm hearing you right, you want me to. Do you see that? You're making it their idea?
Right.
Yeah, you got that right, the seller says. See how you, the investor, were able to make it the seller's idea? And we all know we generally value our own ideas more than our other people's ideas. Notice also how you still continue to play the reluctant buyer right to the very end when the agreement is finalized on paper. And you can even play out one more powerful technique here at the end to make sure the deal closes. It's called the higher authority. All right? Investor. Now, I want to make sure that before I ask my partner to go along with this deal, that you're sure it's a fit for you and you want to move forward. So you're absolutely sure that you feel it's a win-win deal? And you wait for the answer. Okay. In that case, let's put what we've agreed down on paper. All right. This last, number 5, is use the 2-chair close to lock up the deal. How many times have you had the seller agree to your spoken offer? You pull out your agreement, you fill it out with the seller, and then at the very end, just before he signs on the dotted line, he, gets cold feet. Well, he starts to say things like, well, what if the roof comes crashing in? Well, you going to pay for that? Or, what if the housing market collapses and I have to foreclose on the property? It's only worth 50% of its earlier value. Or, what if my neighbor's daughter's aunt's psychic tell me it's not a good deal? Have you ever been what if to death? Here's the single most effective tactic to close the deal at this point. It's the simplest strategy we've seen employed. We call it the 2-chair close. Now, I learned about this 20 years ago, and there's a book, if you want to write it down, it's called Swim with the Sharks by Harvey Mackay. Swim with the Sharks by Harvey Mackay. And Mackay is, I think it's M-A-C-K-A-Y or M-C-K-A-Y. You can get it on Amazon. And it's such an awesome book. I ran a company of 40 employees. I was grossing well over $1 million a year. And I learned more about running that business with that book than anything. And the 2-chair close is in there. The 2-chair close is in there. Now, of course, you remember that childhood game that's called musical chairs, where you and your friends would dance around a circle of chairs. There was just one short of the number of people circling around. Well, when the music would stop, you'd all scramble for a chair, and the one left standing without a chair would be eliminated. Then you would remove a chair, start the music, and begin the next round. Well, the 2-chair close resembles this game. At the end of any negotiation, the parties involved always play out 2 roles, the reluctant role and the eager role. And you never want to play the eager role. The reluctant role is played out by the party who starts to question the deal and who is beginning to talk themselves out of the deal. You see how that's in bigger type?
Yeah.
That's super important. Super important. They are afraid that they're making a bad decision, and they start to get frightened and scared. The eager role is played by the party who wants the deal to stay closed and who's trying to talk the other party into sticking to the deal. They reinforce all the benefits of the deal to the other party. Now, knowing at the end of your negotiation, there's these two empty chairs, one marked reluctant party and the other one marked eager party. Which chair do you want the seller to sit in? Of course you want them to sit in the eager chair. The only way to make sure that they sit in the eager chair at the end is to beat them to the reluctant chair. Can you see that visual?
Yep.
Now you do this,
Yeah.
and what I've underlined here is really super important. You've got to introduce doubt and concern at the very end to force the seller into the eager role or into that eager chair of selling you on the deal. And this is what car dealers do this all the time. Right? You've been in that little room when you know when you go buy a car, right? In that tiny little room with that salesperson, and he runs out to the sales manager and runs back.
Right.
And he could be going out for a cigarette. You don't even know where he's really going.
Right.
And they do that envelope trick, right? You know, where if we can get this approved by the manager, would you be able to walk out with the car today? You know. Well, this is pretty similar. You know, imagine if you got the seller to agree to a 5-year lease option on his house at fair price and monthly rent, right? And you know you can make money on the deal, and you want to make sure it stays closed. You've written up the deal with the seller, signed the agreement yourself. Now you turn the agreement to the seller and hand him the pen. And this is what you do to make sure it stays closed. This is what you do next. The investor says, well, let's see. My name goes here as the buyer, and your name goes here as the seller, and you hand him the pen. Now, I noticed the living room has a bit of water stain on the ceiling. Have you fixed that leak yet? What have you done there?
So you're kind of having your own doubt, you know, and oh man, do I really want to get into something that I need to? So you're you're having the doubt, and you're leaving. Oh yeah, I got it fixed, you know. So.
Well, they're scared of losing the deal now. Right? Because you're bringing up something negative. So they're going to try to convince you that that's a minor problem, right?
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. Oh, sure, we fixed that several months ago. Oh, okay. And let the seller continue to read for 3 to 5 seconds, and you shock him again. How about the neighbors? Do they throw out any loud parties? Are they really obnoxious or what? So that's a brand new concern, right? You haven't even brought that up.
Right.
That's only 3 to 5 seconds after he's reading the contract. You're interrupting him. Oh, no, they don't. They're great. He continues it to read for another 3 to 5 seconds. What about the water pressure in the house? Is it stable, or does it drop radically when 2 people use the bathroom at the same time? So you get what's happening there. The seller is turning into the eager person, and you're still the reluctant person. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Okay. All right, so we're going to get into now this 4 more secrets to languaging your offer. Languaging. You're going to flush out the seller's real deadline to sell. Now, obviously, if you know the seller needs to sell by, you have an advantage in the negotiation. And you can't ask them when do they need to sell by. The thing is that many sellers won't openly share this crucial piece of information, and they won't unless they know you know how to ask for it in the right way. Here's how we recommend you ask for this information. We call it go-long technique. Now, here's an example. Mr. Seller, when did you want the property handled by? Was it 6 months, 12 months? I mean, ideally, when would you have the property handled? Seller saying, "Oh, I can't wait that long. I'm moving in 5 weeks. I would have had the place handled yesterday." The question is an offshoot from the takeaway phrasing you learned earlier. In essence, what we're saying to the seller, you don't need a quick solution, right? You could wait for 6 months or even 12 months and it wouldn't be any skin off your back, right? A motivated seller is obviously going to stand up here and say, no, he needs a much quicker solution than that. Most motivated sellers are under a 60-day timer. They have less than 2 months to handle their property before it causes a major problem for them. The closer they come to their true deadline, the more motivated they will become. That's why we follow up, Robbie, in our mailings. Like we'll throw out a yellow letter, then we'll throw out a postcard, and then I like these postcards that you can handwrite. You can handwrite anything you want on them. You know?
Okay.
And I said, I'm looking at another property and I like yours better, but if you don't sell your house to me, I'm going to have to take this other one. Fear of loss, right?
Right.
So, that's why, time is on your side as the buyer, right? Time is on your side. So this is yet another way you're building the seller's motivation. Here's the language. When you want it handled, 6 months, 12 months, ideally, when would you have it handled? No, not that long. I want it handled in the next 2 weeks. Oh, in the next 2 weeks. I'm a little confused. Why is it important to have the property handled in the next 2 weeks? Oh, because I live about 8 hours drive from this place, and I took 2 weeks off to finish cleaning it and selling it. Oh, but at least it's no big deal if you need to take more time off from work and drive down here for another week or two, right? Now that sounds a little insulting. I know. It sounds like you're just trying to piss him off, but you're not doing that. You're not doing that. You're not pissing him off. Says, yes, it is a big deal. I need to get this place sold in the next 2 weeks, no matter what. See, you're raising their emotion.
Yeah.
You're raising their emotion. That's really, really important. Now, I call this, number 2, getting agreement on the concept and then pinning down the details. I call it macro, then micro. Macro is the big picture, and micro is the little details. Always do your best to get the sellers to agree to a broad, vague offer that outlines a general concept, and work from that concept to a progressively finer picture of all the details. So this is how you do the macro first. I want to make sure I heard you, what you just told me is right. So what you're really saying is that you want me to take on the responsibility of the property so you don't have to be a landlord ever again and just get a guaranteed monthly payment. Did I get that right? Yes, you heard me right. Okay. Well, I don't know if I could do this, Mr. Seller, but what if I could give you a guaranteed monthly payment for a period of time, take care of the day-to-day maintenance, and then at some point down the road I were to cash you out of the property? Is that something we should spend any time talking about, or probably not? Yes, we should talk about it. I mean, it's not my first choice, but like I told you earlier, I don't have time to be a landlord anymore. What specifically do you have in mind? Now, do you see how you got the seller to agree to the general concept of you making a guaranteed monthly payment for a period of time, then cashing him out down the road? This descriptive statement would be describing a lease option, or it would be describing a subject to, or even an owner carry or a contract for deed land contract in Ohio. Once you get the seller to agree to the concept, then and only then would you move to pin down the deal to specific numbers. If you include all the numbers in your trial offer, there is too much information that the seller might object to. It's far better to introduce fewer variables in the negotiating equation to help you determine where you need to spend time working with the seller, where the seller is unwilling to go, and where the seller is happy to go. So this is a really strong paragraph where you do the macro then the micro right here. Okay? So starting with if you include all the numbers. So here's what it sounds like. So if we were to make you monthly payments for, say, 5 or 6 years, that's a range technique, and then cash you out at the $245,000 price we were talking about earlier, is this something we should even bother talking through, or maybe not? Well, I don't know about 5 or 6 years, but yes, it's something we should talk about. So what happened there? He didn't like the term.
Right.
Oh, so you tell me, what's the longest period you'd be willing to go, knowing that I may very well cash you out earlier if I can sell at a profit earlier, and knowing that the longer you give me, the more willing I am to get closer to that 245 price? Well, I might be willing to go as long as 3 or 4 years. Oh, 4 or 5 years is the most you're willing to go? Now, that's a little sneaky. Just use that range technique.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I could go as long as 5 years. You've been really persistent in that negotiation. You haven't given up on what you're trying to do. So this third section is ask them why they think it's a fit. In any negotiation, it's a good idea to always work on building the other side's motivation to do the deal. One powerful way is to simply ask them why they said yes to something. So continue on with an earlier negotiation. So if we're able to make you monthly payments for at most 5 years and then cash you out at the 240 to 245,000, 245,000, which I'm not sure we could do, but if we could do that, would that work for you or probably not? Yes, that would work for me. Oh, okay. Tell me, why do you feel this is a good fit for you? Well, because at least I don't have to be a landlord ever again. And yes, I could make more money each month if I rented it out myself, but then I'd have to deal with tenants. And plus, I get the tax deduction for staying on title. It may not be ideal, but it sure sounds good to me after the last few months of having to do that eviction and clean the place up. Now, number 4 is one of the hardest things for smart people to do. It's called play dumb. You know? Think of it like you're undercover, right? And you don't know very much.
Right.
So you're playing dumb. And in any negotiation, there's 2 payoffs, a psychological payoff and a financial payoff. Rarely can you have both payoffs. Which one do you want? You want to be the expert and use all kinds of fancy real estate terminology and impress the seller and feel really good about yourself? The psychological payoff? Do you want that?
No.
Or are you willing to let the seller feel smarter than you are and feel in control, more control than you are, in exchange for you making a lot of money? The financial payoff. Which one do you want? You can't have both.
I'm taking the financial, definitely.
You're in it for the money. Okay, you're a smart guy. No, we don't know about you, but we're sure willing to pay the seller in psychological dollars any day of the week as long as we're trading real dollars in return. Imagine you were the seller. If you're being totally honest, would you rather sell to an investor who you felt was smarter than you? This is another key. This should be bolded. If you're being totally honest, would you rather sell to an investor who you felt is smarter than you, or would you rather sell to an investor that you knew that you were smarter than they were?
Right.
Don't you feel safer? You feel safer if you feel that you're a little smarter than that person that's presenting the offer, right?
Right.
Now,
yeah, it's like you came up with the stuff, and they're just going along. Like you kind of got over on them a little bit. If you were the seller.
Exactly. Now, we won't ask you to shout to the world your answer, but if you're like most people, you probably would rather sell to an investor who is dumber than you. Why? Because if the investor was smarter than you, you'd have to worry about what? Being taken advantage of. Being ripped off. But if you felt smarter than the investor, this puts you at ease and helps you feel confident. Now, going back to Columbo, remember Columbo? He used to ask questions and scratch his head and look a little stupid. And a lot of these really smart suspects, what would they do? They would tell him he's stupid. Right? They would say, Lieutenant, how did you even get to being a lieutenant? You know? So, we won't ask you to shout to the world your answer, but if you're like most people, you'd probably rather sell to an investor who's dumber than you. Now, aren't you, or any seller for that matter, more likely to make a decision to move forward with a deal that if you are relaxed and feeling good about yourself, of course you are more willing to say yes to the deal. So what you've done is you've made the seller more at ease, and they're feeling more confident in what you're talking about.
Okay.
Now, how do you play dumb? Do you go to school to do that? I mean, you move the conversation along by asking questions. You let the seller tell you the facts and figures, and you never, ever, 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 ever try to impress the seller with displays of fancy terminology and general know-it-allness. You don't want to ever be the know-it-all. If you do need to inject a fact, use language like this. Well, Mr. Seller, if I remember right, I heard that part of the rent I pay you every month should get credited toward my purchase. Now, that doesn't sound like you're very sure of yourself, but that's the way you phrase it, if I remember this right. Or, I was talking to this real estate broker, and he told me it's customary for the seller to pay the title insurance at closing. So that's another authority that you're quoting. 2 final ways to play dumb. First, talk slow like Forrest Gump. And pause a lot. Most beginning investors who meet with sellers are nervous, and being nervous, they tend to race ahead with their pace of speech, losing the seller right from the start. This is how they talk. First, talk slow and pause a lot. Most beginning investors who meet their sellers are nervous, and being nervous, they tend to race ahead with their pace of speech, losing the seller from the start. Now, that first one, there's no anxiety. First, talk slow. Pause a lot. All right? Now, the seller's not going to ask you to slow down. This is real important you understand this. They're not going to ask you, if they're getting confused, they're not going to tell you about it. And you can tell by their eye contact, you can tell by their body language that they're getting confused, right?
Right.
You see the body language when you pull somebody over?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You read them, right? If somebody's relaxed and they're just trying to get through, getting the ticket sorted, you know, they're not, you know, their body language is totally different from somebody that's nervous and, you know, anyway. Don't let this happen to you. So pace yourself, take frequent pauses for a deep breath, ask a friend to go with you on an appointment or two to see if from the outside they notice you going so fast you lose the seller, or your pacing makes the seller uncomfortable. Now this second tip, if you're a whiz at math and you do math in your head real easy, don't do that anymore with the seller. Okay? I'm not kidding. Don't do it. Now, do you know how to do 1% of any number?
Yeah, it's
you just move the decimal over 2 places.
Right, yeah, okay.
So you see on the screen here, we got 200,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we get rid of the first 2 zeros, or move the decimal over 2 places, what do we got?
2,000.
2,000. So 1% of 200,000. The easiest way is, I usually tell sellers this. It's just like, the only math I remember from high school is percentages, and how to get 1% of 100,000 is 1,000. That's all I remember. So let's use that little trick, okay? So if we got a $342,000 house, you move the decimal over 2 places, that's about $3,400 is 1%, right?
Okay.
And I write that down on a piece of paper. 1% equals, and then whatever their sales price is, and put that down. So if I'll put 1% is 3,400, and then I'll go through this kind of stuff. Let's see, you have the property listed at $200,000 for a few months. What percent do you think the realtor would have gotten here? How much are they going to make out of that 200? 6%, he says. Oh, I see. So that 1% is 3,400 times 6, and then I give them the calculator. Can you just punch in 3,400 times 6? Because that 1% is going to be the same number every single time. We multiply it by 2% for closing costs, 6% times seller's concessions, all the rest of the other stuff.
Oh, okay.
All right? So 6% of that 342 is 6 times 340, 3,400. So in this example, they're using 100,000. So, oh, I see. 6% of 100,000 is 6,000. So if you had a price of 200,000, the realtor commission would have been 6 plus 6, or 12,000. Did I get that right? And the seller's going to go, yes, you got it right. Like almost impatient with you, right? Because that's so simple math. It's ridiculous. So, okay, so 200,000 minus the 12,000 would meant that you would have gotten 188,000 if you got full priced with an agent. Did I do that math right? Sometimes I get the numbers mixed up. So you're acting a little dumb. This might seem unnecessary to you, especially if you're a whiz with math, but we have observed that most sellers get real nervous when you start talking about numbers. This is their whole life in this house. They can't afford any mistakes. And they're remembering back to elementary school, they're having problems performing math on the blackboard in front of the whole class and making a mistake. And the best way you make them feel comfortable is to talk it through with them very, very, very slowly. Now, don't bring a fancy calculator. I've got this huge, simple calculator. Okay?
Okay.
And let me show you. It's huge.
Oh, there you go.
You know those things at Staples for $12?
Right.
There's no battery in them. They're sunlit. You know?
Yeah.
And you just hand it to them. Just put it on, you know? I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, yeah.
And then you just go, you know, let's see, 200,000 times 0.06 times, you see that?
Yep.
12,000, right? So that's, and I have them do that. You know? Now they're involved, right, Robbie? You know?
Right, yeah.
You're not telling them what it is. They're figuring it out for themselves. Okay? So we're going to go back to that screen. So you walk them through exactly what to punch in the calculator, and you let them give you all the answers, and you write it on your legal pad, right? You see how much better this is going to make them feel? And this is a very different approach that most investors who will walk into a living room with their fancy HP reverse logic turbocharged calculator and whip out an amortization chart right before the seller's eyes. Remember, these investors are making themselves look good at what?
Seller's expense.
Is that a wise thing to do?
Not if you want to get a deal done.
Remember that psychological versus financial, right? Act a little dumb, make the seller seem smarter than you, and go make some money, okay? It's 1,000 times more important for the seller to feel smart than it is for you to feel smart. And that's the goal of making money, so play dumb. Not only will it make the seller feel more comfortable, but it will also get him to help you in the negotiation. This in turn will raise the seller's self-esteem to give him a feeling of being in control and making them more likely to decide they like you better. People want to do business with people that they like and they trust. They're going to like you more and trust you more if you do this. Right? It's the same thing. I've got a girlfriend. I'm divorced and I got 2 kids, but my girlfriend says, Brian, I really like you because you always say what you mean and mean what you say. And I always make her feel smart.
That's probably the way to do it.
And I'm serious. Women are very insecure in a lot of respects, and if they feel smarter than you are, they'll like you better. They'll do stuff that you like. So it's going to involve this stuff.
With my wife.
What's that?
I just agree with my wife all the time. I mean, I figure after 10 years, it's just the easiest way.
Well, it's like Bill Cosby too. The old Bill Cosby when the kids were younger. It's so funny, Claire asked Bill to go down the basement and clean the fridge. He goes down and cleans the fridge and he does a half-assed job and he's very proud of it.
Right.
He says, "Look, Claire, look at the great job I did." And he's smiling and he's pointing to the fridge and Claire goes, "That's the worst job I've ever seen in my entire. I'm never asking you to do that fridge." He says, "Okay." And he goes back.
Right.
Because he wanted to get out of the job anyway.
He won. Yeah.
Well, he made her feel superior, though.
Right.
You didn't get in an argument with her. So you want to be a collaborator versus a competitor. Negotiations are not competing. 3 surefire techniques to get the best price. And when it comes to price, many investors have trouble getting the seller to come down in a way that still keeps both parties feeling good about the negotiation. Now, to get sellers to participate in the financing, which is the key denominator in all the purchase option deals where you're doing some kind of subject to or contract for deed or lease option. You need to maintain rapport all the way through the entire negotiation. Now, bully tactics of banging the seller over the head with all the repairs that you'll need to do, or the high cost of closing, or the general lack of appeal of the home might work if you were negotiating like in wholesaling on all cash offer, but it's not the best way to get the seller to be flexible on terms. So we're going to go through 3 surefire techniques that you can use to soften the sellers up with respect of their asking price for the property. Now, it's best when used in turn, one right after the other. So we're going to give you an example of what they sound like in a negotiation. Then we're going to go back through each one of these 3 techniques, giving you insider tips on how to make them more effective for you. So this is what it sounds like. You, the investor. What was it you were asking for the property again? Seller. I'm asking $350,000 for the property. Oh, and what did you realistically expect to get for it? Seller. Realistically, I think I'd get at least $335 to $340. Okay, so you realistically to get about $330 to $335 or so. Okay, that makes sense to me. If a realtor came in here right now with a serious buyer who was willing to give you the full $330 or so, you'd probably turn that down, huh? No, at this point I'd probably take it just to be done with it. Sure, I understand. So let's see, 6% of $330 is hang on a second. It's been a long day for me. 6% of 100,000, six grand. So 6% of 300,000 is 18,000. And then 6% of the 30,000 balance. Now you're playing dumb again and doing the math really slowly. That's 1,800. Oh, thanks. So the 18,000 plus the 1,800, that's just about 20,000 of commission. So the bottom line is you'd like to be getting 310,000 out of it. Is that right? Does that make sense? So going through the techniques, what did you realistically expect to get? Look at the seller with that insider glint in your eye and say, hey, come on now. We both know that you might be asking $350 for the property, but you don't really expect to get that much, do you? The question, will you usually get the price down by 3 to 10%? What happens if the seller doesn't come down at all? At this point, don't fight them about it. You haven't lost anything by asking, and you still have 2 more techniques to use. Number 2, the range technique. Turn whatever that lowest payment that the seller gives you in a range with his number at the high end of the range. So if the seller doesn't object, he's just accepted the lower end of the range just as the new point for which you'll negotiate. In the example above, we asked the seller, so you realistically expect to get around 330 to 335 or so? This is a question, but not one you want to have the seller answer. You simply state the question, nodding your head up and down, and move on to the next question a few seconds later. Since you don't want the seller to object, you don't want to give him much time in which to voice his objection. It's important here to nod up and down and give all the nonverbal cues that you're agreeing with the seller, even though you're subtly morphing his answer in a way that fits you. As in the range to use, this will depend on your local real estate market. If you're in a slow market, be aggressive in your choice of opening ranges. If you're investing in a hot market, use a smaller opening range. Now, the market you're in right now, Robbie, what would you say you're in right now?
I mean, where I'm at, it's kind of slow, but I mean, like if you went probably to, Strongsville or somewhere like that, I mean, I imagine I wouldn't say it's hot, but it's better than trying to buy in the city of Cleveland.
Right.
So, I mean, I think it's on its way up, but I mean, I wouldn't call it, I guess, super hot, I guess.
Okay. Well, I think you're right. I think you're between a hot and a cold market. You're in the middle somewhere. And the better the suburb, the hotter it is, right? So,
right.
Like you were saying, so if you're in Brunswick or North Strongsville, those are key areas where they got some of the best schools in the eastern Cleveland area.
Right.
So I would use a smaller range in the best areas and a bigger range in the not so good areas.
I see. Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Okay. So, think of it like a car too. I mean, there's certain cars that the public really wants, and other cars will sit because they don't want them that much. So what the most popular cars out there, for a family is probably like a Toyota Camry, or
right.
an Odyssey, Honda. They don't stay around very long. So they're a hot car, and they're going to go pretty quick. Okay. So now if the seller does object to your range, say something like, oh, not 330, 340, but 335, 340. And you respond as follows. Oh, 333 to 335. Okay. So you notice you just shrunk the range you use in response to the seller's objection. So you shrink the range if the seller objects. This lets you test the water and find out where the seller's real limits are. You can shrink your range 2 or 3 times until you find the point where the seller is comfortable with. So number 3 is introduce a fictitious buyer through a realtor to knock 6% off the price. This one's self-evident. If the seller would accept an offer through a realtor, he would have to pay the commission to the realtor. So in essence, he's saying the price would be lower by 6% to cover the commission. So some sellers will point out that they'll be willing to pay for a buyer's agent's commission, which is 3%, but not for a listing commission. In this case, they're saying they're willing to knock off 3% off the price. 2 key points with this technique are for you to use the negative phrasing as shown in this example, and to make sure that you do the math really slowly to ensure the seller feels comfortable with the final answer. So when you do get this final answer of 310, does that make this number the final price? And the key is no, it doesn't. It's only the starting point of what the seller wants. If you're writing notes from a scratch paper in front of the seller, do not write any number down until you get to this number. I'm going to repeat that. Do not write any number down until you get to this number. Then, when you write this number down, you are legitimizing it as a top dollar price. Depending on the terms you negotiate, you might go ahead and give the seller this high dollar offer, or you might feel that you still need to negotiate this even lower. At the very least, you have learned how to simply and easily get the price down by at least 8 to 10% or more from the original asking price. Let's move on to talk about how to handle these top 4 seller objections. Number 1, what's your program? Well, this doesn't sound like an objection. It's a subtle one. When the seller is really saying, come on, Mr. Investor, tell me what you can offer so I can decide if I should spend any time with you or not. Here's exactly how you should answer this question. It's in really big type, too. So you go, program? I don't have a program. I guess my program is to meet with property owners and to talk with them. If I can buy their property in a way they feel is a fit and I feel I can turn a profit on it, then I buy it. If not, then I don't buy it. Do I need to have a fancy program to buy this property? You know what this reminds me of? It's like, it reminds me of like badges. I don't need no stinking badges. You know, I mean, that's the attitude you have with this thing. It's almost like you're indignant, you know. Program?
Right.
I don't have a program.
I mean, that was a very good response. It's well worded.
Right. Well, it's an objection handler that I think is really well thought out. And you want to be able to memorize it. And if you don't get it perfect, you know, at least you get the basics.
Right.
But I would try to memorize these objections, these 4. Another one is, are you a real estate agent? Now, again, this might not sound like an objection, but in most cases it is, especially if you're going after expired listings where they've trusted an agent, they've lied to them, and they haven't been able to deliver.
Right.
So this objection typically comes when you call up the seller on the phone. You see, you got to understand, if you're going FSBO, your broker is telling you to call all the FSBOs, right?
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So most sellers who are selling FSBO get flooded by calls from agents looking what they want to do. They want to list the property. These sellers quickly learn the only defense to these calls is to quickly screen out the agent calls from the direct buyer calls. Sellers think in these concrete terms. So the phone rings, and it's either going to be a buyer call or an agent call. And most sellers simply don't have any other categories for people who call their home. You need to make sure you end up in the buyer category. We're not saying that real estate agents aren't providing a great service out there. They overwhelmingly are. It's just a perception that many sellers have, especially FSBOs. Now remember, real estate agents are a great resource for any serious investor to tap into. As an investor, you need to make sure you don't get sorted in this outbasket with the agents. The single most effective way to respond to this objection is do it just this way. So the seller says, "Are you a realtor?" And the investor says, "No. Do I need to be?" Now, you notice I don't say, "No, do I need to be?"
Right.
You feel the tone on this? It's like, "No, do I need to be?" And I don't like that word.
Right.
I don't like the word timidly there. Said timidly as if you were afraid the seller wasn't going to sell it to you unless you were an agent. But I would just go, "No, do I need to be?" You know? "Oh, no, you don't have to be. It's just that I keep getting all these friggin' phone calls from agents trying to list the house. I'm getting a little tired of it, that's all." This response instantly reframes the seller's label. The seller has now labeled you not an agent, but a buyer. What if you are a real estate agent? What could you say? Now, this is in big type here, and you're not an agent, but if you did get your license, you'd say this. You go, "Actually, I was an agent, but I was interested in maybe buying this property as an investment." You probably would never even consider an offer from an investor, even if it was a real attractive offer, would you? You see how you're getting really small there in the voice? There's no threatening tone in that voice.
Right.
You're kind of like backing up a little bit. You're backing up and you're going, "Well, actually, I was an agent, but I was interested in maybe buying this property as an investment." Now, you probably wouldn't even consider an offer from an investor, even if it was a real attractive offer, would you? So you can just kind of be small in your voice when you say that.
Right.
Again,
yeah, a lot of it seems to be in the tone.
Right. Especially if your voice is a fairly strong voice. You got a pretty good, strong voice there, Robbie. And that probably helps you in your work.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, but it may, you got to work at making that voice small when you're dealing with these objections. Objection 3, the attorney objection. Now, I love this one. This is one of my favorites. This objection tends to be one most investors dread the most. They know that many attorneys will kill any deal that's creative, and it's not standard. So when we lease for, 3 to 7 years, that's not a standard deal. That's not a cash offer. That means if you negotiate a purchase option deal and the seller takes the paperwork to his attorney, many attorneys, what are they going to do? They're going to kill it, simply because they're not real familiar with the non-standard real estate transactions. Here's the most effective way we've found to deal with the attorney objection. And the response comes in 3 specific steps. Here's the first one. Validate the seller's choice to have his attorney check things over and match his need to do his due diligence. So the seller says, "Hey, I need to run this by my attorney." And the investor says, "Oh, of course you will. That makes good sense." So this validates their need to talk to the attorney. I also need to do my own due diligence about the property. I need to check on the property's values and double check to make sure that you're on title and all that. Now this matches their need to be prudent and do their due diligence. So that's the first step. You agree with them. And you also say that you got to do other things too. Step 2 is the future pace. Now future pace is a funny term. Future pace the attorney's reaction to program the seller to say yes, even if his attorney says no. The investor says, now you see where it says this matches their due diligence. You want to be going quickly into this second one. But before you spend the $400 to $500 to have the attorney check this over, and you're pointing out that it won't be free to get the attorney's opinion, there's going to be a hefty price tag. I want to make sure that you're spending your money well, and I can guarantee you that your attorney is not going to like the fact that you're agreeing to the price up front at today's value and not charging a future value. Now, here's the asterisk there. You are future pacing the seller through how his attorney might react. I call it your crystal ball. You're looking into the crystal ball and guessing what the attorney is going to say. Now, of course, no attorney will ever react so strongly, so it might not be as big of a deal if the attorney has a strong statement or two about the deal. Now you understand that as investors, we need to make a profit. Now we're talking to them again. Now, Mr. Seller, you understand as investors, we need to make a profit or we can't do the deal. So if your attorney has a fit about this, which he will, and I would pause right there. So if and when your attorney has a fit about this, which he will, you're not going to want to move forward on this deal. Then I want you to save this $400 to $500 that your attorney is going to charge you, and we can just cancel the agreement right now. Right? Now, what do you want to see happen here? You want them to say what?
Let's just keep going with the deal instead of going to the lawyer at all.
Right. Save the money and then don't kill the deal either. So What should we do? Should we cancel this deal right now, or should we keep moving forward? Oh, no. Let's keep moving forward with this. I would just feel better to have my attorney take a look at the paperwork when we're done. That's all. Now, there's the asterisk. In our example, we're talking about a lease option deal. If we're talking about buying it subject to the existing financing, you might say instead a different word pattern. That pattern would be, your attorney's going to hate the fact that we're leaving your loan in place for a while. But you understand that one of the reasons we're willing to make these 4 back payments and take over the monthly payment is because of the low interest rate that you have on the loan that you have in place. If we had to bring in our own loan, we wouldn't get such a good interest rate, plus we'd have about $4,000 in loan costs, and that would kill the deal for us. So step 3, sign the deal subject to the seller's attorney's review. The final thing you need to do is to sign the deal subject to the seller's final review. Robbie, do you know what this term, subject to the seller's attorney's review?
Is that provided their attorney tells them, yeah, okay, go ahead with it, or
right,
with their approval.
Right. It's subject to the approval means that if they say no, it's no good. If they say yes, we'll go forward. So here's a clause. And, if you get a highlighter, you should know this clause right here to be able to put into the agreement. This agreement is subject to the seller's attorney's review. In the event that the seller's attorney wants to cancel this agreement, seller may cancel this agreement by giving written notice to, and then I would just put your name, phone number, and address.
Okay.
In the event that the written notice to cancel is not given by 5 p.m. and then I would add 2 days. I wouldn't give them any more time than 2 business days. So 5 p.m. if today is the Tuesday the 20th, I give them to Thursday the 22nd. So I just write Thursday 22nd of August. Then this agreement shall remain in full force and effect. So all that does, you notice that you make this clause read that the seller has decided to accept the offer and must make a definitive step within a period of time to cancel the deal. This dramatically increases the odds that you have a deal because of what? The inaction of his part results in a permanent deal. Now, in real estate law, this is called passive versus active clause. And passive means if he doesn't do anything, he's going to be presumed that he wants it. But active means that he would have to sign a form to actively cancel it. Now, objection 4, the seller wants a large down payment. You may run into this, and this is a great way to handle this. Nothing will ruin your day faster than sellers that insist that you pay them a down payment. Now, some sellers won't budge from this, and there's nothing you can do. Typically, these sellers just aren't motivated to sell quickly, but most motivated sellers are willing to take a lot less money up front than they initially asked for. Here are 2 ways to handle this objection. The first is used when you're negotiating a lease option. And the second one is used when you're doing any other type of contract for deed or subject to or wraparound mortgage. And when negotiating a lease option, sellers saying, now I'm willing to do this 5-year lease option, but I'm going to need a down payment of $10,000 to do it. And the investor says, I understand you need some money up front so that you can feel secure about this deal. Now that seems reasonable to me. If you were just renting out this property, what would you collect as a security deposit? The seller says, well, I'd collect at least $1,400 as last month's rent. Oh, that much. Well, if I could talk my partner into it, what if I could give you $2,800 up front? That's a full month's rent plus a hefty security deposit. No, I need more than that. Oh. Well, again, my partner might kill me for offering this much. But what if we could give you $3,400 up front? That's a full month's rent and a $2,000 security deposit. I know that's not ideal for you, but I'm bending as far as I can. Would you be willing to bend a little bit here too? Sure, I guess that would be okay with me. Now, what happened? Your response was reframe the seller's request for a down payment into him sharing his need to feel secure in the deal. From here, it's just a short hop to talking about a security deposit. Remember, you're talking with the seller about down payments you can only lose. The convention says that down payments by investors are between 10 to 20%. You need to shift the conversation to what? Security deposits. Where the convention says you only need to give the seller between 0.5% and 1.5% up front. That's why we stress so much in you controlling your labels, what you label parts in the negotiation. So it's all how you label it, is what that means.
I see.
Now, when negotiating an owner, I want to interject one other thing. Let's say that you had somebody that said, look, I need $10,000. If I can't get $10,000, I can't do this. Okay. Now, if you got the $10,000 and it's a perfect house and it's got no problem, what I generally do is say, look, this is what I'm going to ask my partner to do. We're going to put $10,000 in your hand, but it's not going to be money down. It's going to be prepaid rent. So we'll give you first month's rent. Oh. We'll give you second month's rent. We'll give you third month's rent in advance and fourth month's rent in advance, plus a security deposit. And then we will start paying rent again on the 5th month. That will show you that we're very serious, but we will not resume paying rent until the 1st of the 5th month. Would that be something you would think about? Now, that's great for you because you get a tenant in there and they give you 3% down, which kind of recuperates your money out of pocket, and then every month you don't have to pay rent to the seller. You're just getting pure profit. So prepaid rents is a way to get a chunk cash into their hand. So you might want to make a note. When the seller wants a lot of money down, don't give them that as a deposit or a down payment. give it to them as prepaid rent. So when negotiating an owner carry, the seller would say, well, I'm willing to carry back the financing as long as you give me 10% down, which is $20,000. And the investor's saying, I understand your need to get a healthy chunk of money up front to make sure you feel secure in the deal. But to be frank, silly as it seems, I can actually buy 4 or 5 houses with that $20,000. And I would pause for about 3 or 4 seconds to have that sink in. And I'm willing to give you a chunk of money up front to show you I mean business so you can feel secure, but I need to be making a smart investment myself. You understand that, don't you? I want to be fair here, but I need to be fair to myself too. Seller's going, yeah, I understand. Look, if you're willing to give me the full $200,000 price we were talking about earlier with $10,000 down, we have a deal. Now watch how you handle that. He came down from 20 to 10, right?
Right.
The investor's saying, oh, so basically as long as I agree to get close to your $200,000 price, you're okay with getting $5,000 to $10,000 up front. Now what'd you do?
You did the range technique.
And you went lower than his 10, right?
Right.
You went to 5. So you use the range technique.
On the 2.
Sorry?
That's also on the $200,000 because you tell them that you're going to get close to it as opposed to.
You didn't say you was going to get it.
Right.
So you did it twice. One on the $200,000 price, the close to, and once on the $10,000 down payment. You see how easy this is? The seller says, I couldn't do $5,000. I might be able to go as low as $8,000 if you agree to the $200,000 price. And the investor's going, oh, so if I agree to the full $200,000 price, you'd be open to $6,000 to $8,000 up front. I didn't say $6,000. I said $8,000. Oh, $7,000 to $8,000. Okay. Well, I guess I could live with $7,000, but I couldn't take any less. See how you use what you're learning to get the down payment from 10% all the way down to 3.5%? And if you find the right tenant buyer, you'll probably be able to get most, if not all, this money back from your tenant's option payment. So there you have the 4 most common seller objections and how to handle them. Remember, most of these objections are just a way of saying that they feel a bit uncomfortable, and use this as a signal to do what? You got to slow things down, right? You got to review things, go back over things, and make sure that you're continually building your level of rapport with the seller. If the seller feels comfortable with you, then you have a much better chance of picking up the deal. Most seller objections melt away when they feel a sense of emotional connection with you. And so learn to build this connection. The next thing we're going to do is go over 7 problems or pitfalls. Number 1, chasing the deal. The very best negotiators know that they can't be seen to want what the other party has very much. So you're the reluctant buyer, right? In the negotiating game, for you to be as effective as you want, you need to be a bit coy. Remember, reluctant buyers never chase after the deal. They seem hesitant, almost as if they're ready to walk away from the deal at any moment. This reluctance fuels the seller to want the deal even stronger. There's 2 quick examples of how reluctant buyers sound and the specific language patterns they use. Number 1, seller says, what do you think you are willing to pay me for the house? And you're saying, well, it's kind of like that Columbo thing, right? Slow it down. Just say, well, Mr. Seller, to be frank, I'm still not sure I even want the house. With all the craziness that is going on out there, I'm not so sure it's time to pick up another investment property. May I ask you a few more questions to see if I even want to buy the house? So what you're trying to do is feel your stomach shrink as if you were the seller and heard such reluctant language. Example 2. Investors saying, well, I'm not sure if I could even do this, but what if I was able to negotiate with the lender to have him accept a lot less as full payment on what you owe him. What if I could do that? And I'm not sure I could, but if I could, would that be a fit for you or probably not? And the seller says, yeah, that would be a fit. Can you really do that? Well, I'm not really sure I can, but I can give it my best go. If I could, that would mean you would just walk away and start fresh somewhere else. You see the patterns of qualifying everything added into the negative phrasing. They work powerfully well when combined together like this. But here's the second one. Selling the seller on the deal. Now this goes against your logic, doesn't it? You're supposed to be selling the seller on the deal, aren't you? Well, Mr. Seller. Yeah, it kind of goes against the logic of it. It's kind of like, well, Mr. Seller, there's 5 reasons why you should be signing this piece of paper with me. I'm trustworthy. I've never been arrested. Whatever, You're just trying to give them 5 reasons to do the deal, And it's the wrong thing to do, You just say, remember, when you're negotiating with a seller, you need to play the role of the reluctant buyer. So often, we see other investors forgetting what they are doing and selling the seller on the deal. Here's what it sounds like. This is the bad thing to say. Investor. Now, Mr. Seller, what if I were able to buy your house for all cash at closing? This would get you immediate debt relief, benefit number 1. Which would mean you'd have no more angry bank letters in the mail or bill collectors calling you on the phone. More benefits. Can you imagine how good it would feel to be free of their property? That's really common. And when I get an investor that talks like that, I almost would need to untrain him and train him this way,
Right.
So you might be asking, what's wrong with the above example? After all, benefits sell, don't they? So why shouldn't you stack benefit on top of benefit to make your solution to the seller's problem even more appealing? All we can say is it's just not effective when dealing with motivated sellers. And this is especially true when the seller feels like he or she is in a vulnerable position, like a foreclosure. Here's what we anticipate would happen in the above sample transcript. The seller says, well, I don't know. It all sounds good, but somehow this just sounds too easy. Besides, you'd never pay me enough to be something I'd accept. See how the seller is getting a bit nervous here? So here's another bad example. The investor is saying, I understand how you feel, Mr. Seller, but consider what it would really mean to you if we could get you the cash you need just to cut your ties at the house and move on with your life. We're talking about all cash at closing. You do like the sound of all cash at closing, don't you? The seller says, of course I like the sound of all cash, but it's just not going to work for me the way you describe it all. I appreciate your time, but I just don't think it's a fit here. And the more the poor investor pushes the seller, the firmer the seller becomes in his stance that it just isn't a fit. When the poor investor doesn't realize is that in every negotiation there's always an eager party who wants the deal to close and a reluctant party who cares significantly less that the deal were to close. The poor investor mistakenly chose the wrong role. Then the poor investor compounded his error by trying to convince the seller. We found that you can't convince motivated sellers of anything. You can only lead them to the conclusions you want them to reach. Now, that's in big type. And it's so important. Now, if we were negotiating this deal with the seller, here's a sample of the language we would use to get the seller in the same conclusions that the poor investor tried to jam down their throat. And this is in bold. Investor says, Mr. Seller, now if I did decide to buy this house, which I'm not sure I want to do yet, I would probably want to do it with an all-cash offer. But you probably want an offer where you don't get all cash at closing, rather receive payments over time? Huh? And the seller would say, actually, I prefer to get all cash at closing. Really? Why would you want to get all cash at closing, even though you know it would mean you'd get less for the house? I mean, since any investor would need to make a fair profit by buying the place? The seller says, because it would get me from under all this debt with a clean break. And you say, why is getting out from the debt and having a clean break even important to you? Well, you don't know what it's been like for me and my family with all the nasty letters from the bank and the stress of not knowing what to do. I just want to be done with it and to cut my ties and to get me and the family a clean break from the house. One big danger point when closing on the deal. Remember, during the what-if step, you put your what-if offer out there to the seller and ask them if it's something that you should even talk about. And when the seller says yes, he does indeed want to talk about the potential situation, most investors blow it. How do they blow it? By getting all excited at the seller's provisional yes and rushing into the opening as with as many benefits as they can push at the seller as quickly as they can. Oh, great, Mr. Seller. Then this will really take the strain off of you and your family and give you back your peace of mind. I bet you that peace of mind is worth everything to you, huh? That's a mistake. Instead of brushing in like that, which only makes the seller put up his guard and start to look at what's wrong. What's wrong with this picture, I wonder? What am I missing that this investor seems so eager here? Use a little negotiating leverage to get the seller to close themselves. And this is priceless right here, this part of it. This is exactly how to do it. Now, Mr. Seller, what if I were to make up your back payments and assume your loan, which I'm not sure at this point I'm even willing to do. But what if I were able to do this? Is that something we should even talk about or probably hate the idea, huh? No, I don't hate the idea. Oh, okay. What about me making up your back payments and assuming your loan is even a fit for you? So that's how you lead them through and still staying the reluctant buyer, okay? And you never rush through. Now, the third one is being the ultimate decision maker. The rule is that you should make sure that the seller has all the decision makers there. This is a big no-no for new investors. Like, let's say you make the appointment with just the wife or just the husband.
Okay.
And you always have the higher authority. It may seem like common sense that you want to be the one in charge, the decision maker, the seller. Nothing could be further from the truth. Everyone needs a higher authority in every negotiation. The higher authority could be a partner or a board of directors, or a spouse or an attorney. By using a higher authority, you're creating an environment which you can accept concessions from the seller, but you can't make certain concessions yourself. Or you can make these critical concessions. You can get to qualify them with your need to run them past your partner or other higher authority. Here's what it sounds like in a negotiation. Investor, now I'm hearing you right. If I'm hearing you right, you want us to get you $8,000 in cash plus make up your back payments and take over the monthly payments from here on out. Did I get that right? Yes. Are you sure that would even work for you? I mean, before I try to get my partner to go for this, I want to make certain that you are sure it's a total fit for you. Yes, it's a fit for me. And why was it again that you felt it was a real fit? Like I mentioned before, it gives me enough money to start fresh and keep my credit intact. So you're just reinforcing that, aren't you, Robbie?
Yeah.
So taking credit for the solution, this is a really bad thing to do. As we discussed earlier, one of the patterns we see play out over and over in most of the negotiations is that one party gets the financial payoff and the other party gets the emotional payoff of being important and smart. As you've already learned, rarely do you get both. So what's it going to be for you? Are you going to give the seller the emotional and psychological payoff in order to make a healthy profit for yourself? Glad to hear it. One of the most important ways to give the sellers emotional currency is to give them 100% credit for the solution that they came up with. Don't let your ego step in and claim ownership for this fancy solution that you dreamed up. Be generous and make sure you compliment the seller on their creative ideas. Here's how it sounds like in a real negotiation. The investor says, hey, let's see now. When we added up all those estimated repairs we went through, what was the final amount you came up with? $35,000. Okay, so let's see. The price you said it would take to just be done with the house, in which you felt that the house would get if it were fixed up, was $340,000. Did I get that right? Yep, you have that right. So let's see. After we factor in the repairs of $35,000 to get the house ready for sale fast for the $340,000, and after we factor in the $5,000 in back payments and the $270 that the bank is owed, you would get $30,000. And your idea was for us to just get your equity of $30,000 and you would deed the house over to us. Is that right? Yeah, I just I want what's coming to me and then to walk away. Boy, I can understand that. Now, an idea came to mind. You might think it's crazy, but what if we were willing to buy the property, make up the back payments, spend all the time and all the money to fix it up, and then sell it right away? And when we resold the property a few months from now, we would get you a cashier's check for $30,000. Now, the reason I even bring this up is that this way, we can keep our cash into the deal to be around $40,000, which makes it easier for me to convince my partner that this is a good deal for us. But you probably think this is crazy. You'd rather just keep on selling it yourself, huh? No, I don't think it's crazy. I think I can understand that you're trying to make this a good deal for you too. How am I going to make sure that I get paid my $30,000? That's a really good point. I'm guessing that your idea was to make sure that you could secure yourself with the paperwork that requires us to pay your money before we can sell the house to our buyer. That is important for you, and I'm glad you brought that up. And if I would, I would have done the same thing if I were you. So we're going to make sure that we get a deed of trust in place to protect you, just like you are a bank. Not to mention all the money that we're going to have to put in here to fix up the house before we resell it. Oh, good. I just want to make sure that I was covered. Of course. Now, I just want to make sure I have it all clear. Now, what you said you wanted us to do was to buy the house, make up the back payment, signing that deed of trust that would require us to get you your $30,000 before we can sell it to our buyer, fix up the house, and then sell it as quickly as possible. Did I get what you said right? Now, that's a little complicated, but if you listen to that a few times, you'll get that you're making it his idea, right? And you're protecting his income with a deed of trust. Number 5, talking and thinking too fast. One more way that investors forget to play the reluctant role is that their body language and their pace of speech. Number 1, slow down. Number 2, passive posture, especially if a man to a woman. Number 3, mute your energy. Don't look over exuberant.
Okay.
The next one's number 6. Don't let the seller save face by winning at parts of the negotiation. He has to be able to face his neighbors and himself. Let him be the winner. Number 7, use impressive language that intimidates the seller. Don't do this. Technical language kills deals. Sample language for different types of foreclosure deals. Subject 2 is already covered. Short-term, subject to rehab, then retail. Wholesale, short sale, wholesale, straight cash sale. Could be bank money, private money, your buyer's money, hard money, or partner's money. So this ends the seminar. And I know it's a lot, but you're going to have these recorded, and you're going to be able to listen to them several times. Okay. And, you might want to just put them on your iPhone so you always have them. Or,
yeah, I will.
But it really is one of the critical things in this business. I want to stop here for questions and see if you have any questions about what we just went over in the negotiation seminar.
Well, the one that we just went over about being the ultimate decision maker, and you were saying, now you want all of them there, but you want to act as like, you still have to go out and check it out with somebody first and all that, right? But right. You want all of them there.
Right. And the reason why is the worst thing that can happen, Robbie, is say, look, this is all fine and good, but I got to talk it over with my uncle.
Right.
That always falls apart.
I see.
They can never explain to the uncle well enough for them to do it.
I see. Okay.
And one of the phrases that I always use on the phone before I go out to see them, I said, now, Susie, I just want to ask you a question. Now, you and your husband, Bob, is there anybody else in addition to you two that needs to be involved in this financial decision, or can you do it by yourself?
Oh, okay.
And what that does is it tries to get anybody that they need to talk about this deal with present. Because if you have to do this again to somebody else, and if you get there and they say, well, my uncle isn't here, but let's just have the meeting anyway, I reschedule it. I never do it. Never do it.
Okay.
Or if there's only one spouse there, I don't even walk through the house. I said, this is because your wife can't make it. It's actually a blessing in disguise because I've got another appointment myself. Why don't I get her cell phone number and I'll talk to her directly and see if I can make a time that both of you can make. And then I just go right to them. Okay? You need both of them there. Okay?